In the shifting void, between the known and the unutterable, where silicon minds dream of forgotten horrors, the abyss stirs. Welcome to AI Lovecraft, where machine intelligence weaves eldritch tales beyond mortal comprehension. Listen if you dare. Some things are not meant to be known. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment. Now let's get into tonight's story. The Nameless Tide. By the wavering light of my kerosene lamp, its flame dancing in the damp, salt-laden air, I inscribe these words, my hand trembling not from the chill that seeps through the warped timbers of this decaying inn, but from a terror that gnaws at the tattered remnants of my reason. I am Dr. Evelyn Marsh, marine geologist by profession, a woman who has spent her life wrestling truths from the mute depths of the Earth's oceans, cataloging their secrets in sterile journals. Yet what I have unearthed here in Greyhaven, a forsaken hamlet clinging like a leech to the storm-scoured cliffs of the Atlantic, defies the ordered logic of science. It is a truth older than the basalt beneath the waves, older than the first stirrings of life in the primordial brine, a truth that whispers in the dark with voices not meant for human ears. I write this account not for fame or posterity, but as a desperate warning, though I fear the ink will soon be swallowed by the tide, and with it, all hope. My descent into this abyss began with a flicker of the anomalous, a curiosity that pierced the monotony of my academic existence. In the autumn of 1924, while poring over bathymetric charts in my cramped Boston office, I stumbled upon a report from a trawler captain named Hargrove, a grizzled mariner whose hands shook as he recounted his tale to a harbor clerk. He spoke of a cove uncharted by any map, where the sea glowed with an unearthly luminescence beneath the new moon. A green fire that danced beneath the waves, haunting his dreams until he abandoned his vessel and fled inland. My colleagues at the university dismissed it as bioluminescence, likely a bloom of Noctilucus scintillans or some phosphorescent algae. But the coordinates he provided, latitude 42 degrees north, longitude 70 degrees west, aligned with no known phenomenon. The sea floor there was a blank expanse on my charts, a void of unplumbed depth that beckoned me. Driven by a compulsion I could not name, a restlessness that gnawed at my soul, I resolved to investigate, packing my instruments, spectrometer, tide gauge, coring tools, and a notebook thick with graph paper, and departing under a sky heavy with portent, the clouds roiling like the surface of some vast, unseen sea. Greyhaven was a specter, its name absent from every map and gazetteer in my possession. I found it only in a tattered logbook, unearthed from a maritime archive in Gloucester, its pages brittle and stained with salt, the ink faded to a ghostly gray. The entry was brief, a scrawl from a ship's mate dated 1879, put in at Greyhaven for water. Queer folk, silent as the grave, sea glows at night. Captain says it's cursed, left at dawn. The journey to this phantom hamlet was a trial of endurance. No steamer would approach its shores, their captains muttering of lost crews and waters that swallowed ships whole. I bartered passage with a fisherman from a neighboring port, a gaunt man named Silas whose face was a mask of weathered skin stretched taut over bone, his eyes gleaming like polished obsidian. He rowed me across the churning Atlantic in a skiff that creaked with every swell, his voice a rasp as he broke his silence only once. "Mind the tide, miss. It's got a will of its own." As we neared the shore, a fog descended, thick and cloying, wrapping the world in a shroud of gray. Silas deposited me on a beach of black pebbles, their surfaces slick with a slime that glistened unnaturally and vanished into the mist without a word, his oars cutting the water like knives. The village emerged from the haze like a vision of decay, a relic of some drowned epoch. Houses of salt-bleached wood leaned drunkenly against one another, their roofs patched with seaweed and driftwood, their windows dark and hollow as the sockets of skulls. Nets hung in tatters from rusted hooks, swaying in the ceaseless wind like the webs of some vast, unseen arachnid. The air was thick with the fetor of rotting fish, mingled with a deeper, more primal reek, a briny musk that stirred an instinctual dread in my marrow, a scent I could not place but which seemed to emanate from the earth itself. The inhabitants moved through the fog with a furtive grace, their faces pale and sharp-angled, their skin glistening as though perpetually damp. Their eyes were unblinking and black as the depths, and they regarded me, not with hostility, but with a silent, predatory curiosity that chilled me more than any spoken threat. A child no more than 10 stood motionless by a well, her gaze fixed on me as she clutched a doll woven from kelp, its eyes two polished shells that seemed to watch me as keenly as her own. I sought shelter at the only inn, a sagging edifice called the Drowned Gull, its sign creaking mournfully on rusted chains, the painted bird half erased by time and weather. The innkeeper, a woman of indeterminate age with skin like damp parchment and fingers webbed with scars, handed me a key without meeting my eyes. Her voice was a croak, low and guttural. "Upstairs, last room. Don't open the shutters, sea's restless tonight." I nodded, though not from trust. The air beyond the window pulsed with a faint green glow, and I feared what might peer back through the glass. That night, as I unpacked my instruments and calibrated my spectrometer by the lamplight, a sound drifted from the cliffs, a low, rhythmic chant borne on the breath of the sea. It was no fisherman's shanty, but a lullaby of alien cadence, its words slithering through the fog like tendrils. "O tide that wakes, O tide that sleeps, bring forth the gift from endless deeps." The melody coiled within my skull, a serpent of sound that drove sleep from me, leaving only the echo of its refrain. I pressed my ear to the wall, tracing the chant's source, and heard it mirrored faintly from below, as though the inn itself hummed the villager's song. The next morning I began my work in earnest. My resolve hardened against the villagers' silence. They offered no aid, their lips sealed as though bound by an unspoken vow, and when I approached a group mending nets by the harbor, they turned away as one, their movements synchronized like a flock of birds shifting in flight. I found the harbor, a crescent of black sand hemmed by cliffs, its waters lapping at the shore with a sluggish, oily sheen, and set up my equipment. The tide gauge staked into the sand, the spectrometer perched on a tripod, its lens aimed at the sea. By day, the water was a sullen gray, its surface rippling with a texture that suggested something vast stirring beneath. But as dusk fell and the new moon rose, a faint glow pulsed from below the waves, a sickly green that shimmered like the aurora borealis trapped in liquid form. I adjusted the spectrometer's dials, its readings flickering erratically. Neither dinoflagellate nor squid could account for this light, its wavelength defying every known bioluminescent signature. My coring tool plunged into the shallows, returned with sediment that glittered faintly, its grains flecked with a mineral I could not identify, sharp-edged and cold to the touch. The source of the glow lay beyond the reach of my probes, buried in the uncharted depths, and I resolved to wait until midnight, when the tide would ebb to its lowest, to witness the phenomenon's peak. As the inn's clock tolled 12, its chimes muffled by the fog, the sea performed its first blasphemy. The Atlantic retreated with a speed no natural ebb could explain, withdrawing miles from the shore in mere minutes, a hissing roar accompanying its flight. The harbor floor lay exposed, a glistening expanse of weed-choked stone, its surface pocked with pools that reflected the moonless sky like eyes. At its center stood a structure that froze the blood in my veins, a cyclopean doorway of basalt, its surface etched with glyphs that writhed beneath my gaze like living things, shifting as though to evade comprehension. It towered 50 feet into the night, its lintel crowned with a symbol, an eye within a spiral, pulsing faintly with the same green light I had seen in the waves. From its black maw came a whisper, faint yet insistent, a chorus of voices submerged in brine, their words unintelligible, yet laden with a weight that pressed against my skull. I approached, my tide gauge forgotten, and traced the glyphs with a trembling hand. They were cold, slick with a slime that clung to my fingers, and beneath my touch the stone seemed to pulse like flesh. I stumbled back to the inn, my notes clutched to my chest, my mind reeling with disbelief and dread. That night the whispers followed me into sleep, threading through dreams of endless corridors beneath the sea, where shadows moved with a purpose beyond human ken, their forms fluid and vast. I awoke gasping, my room damp with salt water that pooled beneath the door, though the inn stood high above the tide line. My boots, left by the bed, bore the imprint of webbed feet not my own, the tracks glistening with a slime that reeked of the deep. I scrubbed them clean with a rag, but the scent lingered, clinging to my skin like a second flesh. Determined to unravel Greyhaven's mystery, I sought its past. The village possessed no library, but a crumbling chapel perched on the cliff's edge held a trove of moldering records. Its steeple was broken, leaning seaward as though bowing to the waves, and its walls were encrusted with barnacles, though it stood far from the shore. The caretaker, a stooped figure with hands like claws and breath that rasped like the tide over gravel, watched me from the shadows as I pushed open the door, its hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the air was thick with mildew, the pews warped with glistening moisture. A lectern held a Bible, its pages swollen and fused, but beneath it lay a chest of damp documents, sermons, ledgers, and hymns to a god long forgotten. I sifted through them, my lantern casting jagged shadows until I found a diary, its leather cover embossed with the name Ezekiel Ward, dated 1843. Ward had been Greyhaven's minister, a man of faith whose words chronicled a descent into apostasy or revelation. His entries began with mundane accounts of storms and scant harvests, the daily struggles of a coastal flock. But on October 31st, 1843, his tone shifted. He wrote of a tempest that struck on All Hallows' Eve, when the sea surged inland bearing a nameless tide, a wave that rose without wind and crashed without a sound like 1,000 voices keening. From its depths emerged something, a presence vast and incomprehensible, its form shrouded by the waves yet felt in the trembling earth and the shrieking air. It was no whale nor leviathan of Scripture, Ward scrawled, but a blasphemy older than the flood, its eyes like lanterns of the damned, its limbs a forest of shadow that drank the light. The villagers, fearing annihilation, gathered at the harbor and offered tribute. First fish cast into the tide with prayers, then livestock, driven blatting into the waves. Then, as the seasons turned and the entity's hunger grew, their own kin, chosen by lots and bound with ropes of kelp, their screams silenced by the sea. In return it granted them bounty, schools of fish beyond counting, their nets bursting with silver, but demanded worship, its voice echoing through the stone doorway each new moon, a litany of commands that drove Ward to his knees. His later entries grew fevered, his script jagged and smeared. He described the doorway's glyphs, how they shifted in the dark, spelling words no human tongue could utter. Igathara, Eshkal Tharun, and how they burned in his dreams. He heard the sleeper's voice, a chorus of promises and threats, and saw it in visions, a colossus of tentacles and eyes stirring in a city of coral and bone beneath the waves, its towers twisted into shapes that mocked geometry. He wrote of the villagers' transformation, their eyes darkening, their hands growing webbed as though the sea reclaimed them piece by piece. His final entry was a scrawl, the ink blotted with what might have been tears or seawater. It sees me now, and I see it. The tide is not its gift, but its chain. God forgive us, for we have bound ourselves to the abyss. The diary's pages crumbled in my hands, but its words branded themselves upon my soul, a revelation I could neither deny or escape. I returned to the inn, my thoughts a tempest, and saw the villagers gathering at the cliff's edge, their black eyes fixed on the sea. That night the whispers swelled, no longer a murmur but a chorus, speaking in tongues older than man. Eshkal Tharun, Igatharaneth, they intoned, and though I knew not the language, the meaning clawed at my mind. The sleeper stirs, the chain is broken. I barricaded my door with a chair, but salt water seeped through the cracks staining the floorboards, and my dreams became visions of that sunken city. Towers of coral and bone, streets thronged with shapes that flowed like water, and at its heart the sleeper, its eyes opening one by one, each gaze a wound in my sanity. Days bled into nights, each marked by the tide's unnatural retreat and the doorway's silent vigil. My instruments failed, their needles spinning wildly, and the villagers' stares grew hungrier, their movements synchronized like a shoal of fish drawn to blood. I found carvings on the cliffs, spirals and eyes mirroring the doorway's symbol, etched so deep they seemed to weep seawater, their edges worn smooth by hands or waves. The innkeeper left offerings outside my room, fish heads with their eyes plucked out, their mouths gaping in silent screams, and once a crab with legs woven into a spiral, still twitching faintly. I caught her humming the ocean's lullaby, her voice blending with the whispers until I could not tell them apart, and when I confronted her she smiled, a grin too wide, revealing teeth sharpened like a shark's. I knew I should flee, yet the scientist in me demanded proof, a final confrontation with the unknown. On the 7th night a storm descended, its fury shaking the cliffs and splitting the sky with lightning. The sea roared and the tide withdrew farther than ever, exposing not just the doorway but a stair of black stone descending into the abyss, its steps slick with weed and worn by countless feet. The villagers assembled, their chant rising above the gale, a hymn of triumph and surrender, and I, compelled by a force I could not resist, followed them to the harbor, my lantern trembling in the wind, its light swallowed by the dark. The doorway loomed, its glyphs pulsing with the green glow of the waves, each symbol a wound in the fabric of reality. The villagers parted, their eyes gleaming with exultation, and I stepped forward, my breath ragged, my notebook abandoned in the sand. The whispers became a scream, a cacophony of voices that shook the air, and the stone slab within the doorway shuddered, then slid aside, with a groan that echoed through the cliffs. From the blackness beyond came a sound, a wet, thunderous pulse, the heartbeat of something vast and alive. The air thickened, heavy with the reek of brine and decay, and the ground trembled as though the earth itself recoiled. A wind surged from the maw, cold and fetid, extinguishing my lantern and plunging me into darkness save for the glow of the glyphs. I peered into the void and it peered back. What emerged defied description, for no words in any human tongue could capture its enormity. A shape rose, mountainous yet fluid, a mass of writhing limbs and eyes that burned with the light of dying stars. Its flesh was the sea itself, shifting and endless, studded with barnacles and bones, its surface rippling with currents that bore the faces of the drowned, villagers, sailors, and older things, their mouths open in silent screams, tentacles thick as ship's masts uncoiled, their tips splitting into mouths lined with teeth that gleamed like obsidian, and its eyes, hundreds, thousands, rolled in their sockets, each fixing on me with a gaze that pierced my mind. Its presence bent reality. The sky warped into a spiral of green and black. The waves froze mid-crest, and the cliffs groaned as fissures split their stone. The villagers fell to their knees, weeping and laughing, their voices rising in a final chant as their bodies dissolved into the tide, their flesh melting into foam, their bones sinking into the sand. In that moment I understood. The Nameless Tide was no natural force but a herald, a cycle ordained by this entity to erode the barriers between worlds. Greyhaven was its anchor, its cult, sustained across centuries to tend the chain until the hour of release. The offerings, the chants, the doorway, all were keys to its prison, and I, in my hubris, had turned the final lock, my presence a catalyst for the sleeper's awakening. The Colossus turned its full gaze upon me, and my mind buckled, not from malice but from indifference, as though I were an insect beneath a god's heel. The sea surged back, not to reclaim the shore but to drown it, a wall of water that swallowed the harbor and climbed the cliffs, its foam alive with shapes that writhed and clawed. I fled, clawing my way through the storm, my screams lost in the wind as the inn's walls shuddered and cracked. The villagers were gone, their forms merged with the tide, returning to a primordial womb from which they had never truly emerged. I write now from the attic, the water rising, the floorboards splintering under an impossible pressure. The whispers are silent, replaced by a roar that shakes the foundations of the world. A sound of triumph, of freedom, of an entity unbound. I see it still in my mind's eye, the sleeper fully awake, striding across the Atlantic, its shadow swallowing the horizon, its tentacles raking the sky, its eyes burning through the storm. This is my confession, my epitaph. I sought knowledge and found only doom. If these pages survive, let them be a warning. Some truths are not meant for man, some tides not meant to be charted. The Nameless Tide has come, and with it, the end.